Jaco, a lot of talk in the media about these new regulations that have been published. Why has it been done now? I think a lot of people think that the Bella Law, as it's called, has been signed in December. So what's the difference here?
Oh, it's a very good question. We've been dealing with Bella for many years, but now it's the Schools Act as amended. And part of the amendments through Bella is to give the minister certain powers to get regulations, to give us procedural guidelines on issues. We've been always dealing with admissions and language, but now the minister can promulgate regulations. And what we've seen now is the first set of regulations, or at least draft regulations, where we as the public will get an opportunity to provide inputs. Now, a possible question is, what's the difference now between the guidelines that the minister issued just a few weeks ago and the regulations that we now see? Well, a guideline is merely a guideline. It's just to get everybody on the same page on how we can or should apply, but there's no legal effect to a guideline. Whilst our regulations is a form of legislation, it's subordinate legislation. And if I can call our legislation the bones or the skeleton or the backbone, but you need to add flesh, and our regulations can be seen as the flesh. It doesn't change the bones or the act or the skeleton. It add value to that. In other words, in the regulations, we can expect to see either timeframes or process, or what factors the SGB must take into consideration when they admit learners, or what the department should consider when they evaluate that specific process. And that's the importance of the regulations. Um, so it's not something new in the system. We've been having regulations for a long time, but this is the first two sets of draft regulations of a series of new regulations we're going to see towards the end of the year.
And can you elaborate a bit, just in layman's terms, about the content of these regulations? What does it say about capacity and admissions?
Yeah, Daniela, the first two is dealing with, like you've said, capacity and the admissions process or admissions to a school. Now, the admissions is not really something new. We've been dealing with admissions for a long time, but we had national policy and not national regulations. So the policy became the backbone of the regulations. So it's more of the same, but again, more process in the document. So that's not something new to us. We're very excited about the development of draft regulations on capacity, as most of the disputes that we've seen, and you're aware of all the disputes we've seen in the media, is normally that emotional fight at the gates of the school, with learners and a bus and an official and a poor principal in the middle, and then fighting about spaces in the school. So these regulations will determine objective criteria that the SGB and the department can use to determine the capacity of that school. In other words, how many children can be accommodated in that school. So it's not only useful for the SGB, but also for that provincial department to do their infrastructure planning, to build new schools or to add new classrooms. So that will be very specific factors you'll take into consideration to determine the number of learners and the availability of seats in the school. I think that will really take the sting out of admissions. Most of our disputes about admissions got nothing to do with either admissions or language. It's normally about space or capacity.
And you also encourage schools to make their voices heard. There is a system for feedback. How does it work? When is the deadline?
Yes, let's start with the deadline. We've got time until the 5th of September to provide our inputs. Well, this is not one of those petition lists where you can simply sign to say we support or we don't support. It's actually a very practical one if we look at the capacity. There's a formula to determine capacity, and we would like to encourage our member schools to literally take out those measure tapes and go from class to class and go and measure the classroom size, the furniture, and apply the criteria to your school and see whether that will really assist the school or not. Maybe there's some criteria we need to add. Maybe there are certain things there that's not very practical, and then we need to inform the department. So we've got an opportunity to do that. But we'll, again, like in the Bella process, Daniela, we'll guide our members. So there'll be a webinar next week. On the 20th of August, we will go through the process. We'll give a brief overview of those two sets of regulations, our impressions, and then practical advice on how to comment. And again, this is a very practical exercise, so please take part in that webinar, and you'll get draft documentation and guidance on how to submit our proposals.
Thank you. And I'll also add those links to the details of those who want to attend the webinar with this video. Thanks so much, Jaco.